The applause was a sudden, sharp crack in the warm evening air. It rose after my father, glass of scotch held aloft, joked that I was 35 with no ring, no baby, and no fancy diploma on my wall. They laughed, a rolling wave of polite, then genuine, amusement. My own family laughed the loudest. No one clapped when I secured the historic lakeside estate. No one raised a glass when I approved the wire transfer for the Michelin-starred caterer, or the live jazz octet, or the couture gown everyone swooned over when Chloe drifted down the grassy aisle. And yet, there they were, all of them, laughing as if I were the punchline, not the one who underwrote the entire elaborate joke. My name is Elara Vance. I own a boutique marketing agency I built from the ground up, and for the past decade, I've held another unlisted title, the Vance family's chief financial officer. Dependable, capable, and, as I was beginning to learn, entirely replaceable. It began subtly, as these things always do. A few $100s to cover my younger brother Liam's rent deposit, a top-up for his car insurance. Then it was Dad's disastrous foray into artisanal coffee roasting, a venture that collapsed and took his savings with it. Then Mom's endless series of expensive wellness retreats in Sedona. Then Liam's tuition for a coding boot camp he never finished, followed by seed money for 3 different startup ideas that never sprouted. And I, Elara, said yes, again and again. Because that's the implicit contract of the good daughter, isn't it? We provide. We solve. We take pride in our self-sufficiency until it becomes the justification for everyone else's reliance. I imagined that if I continued to be their safety net, they would eventually see the person holding it. Not just the account number, but me. The truth, however, was colder. I stopped being their daughter and sister the moment my primary function became financial. They didn't attend the launch party for my agency. They never asked about a major client I landed, only about what I could spare. It wasn't a malicious oversight. It was simply that in their story, my life was the stable, unchanging scenery against which their more interesting dramas played out. I didn't mind, not at first. There's a quiet power in being needed, in smoothing the rough edges of life for the people you believe are your tribe. But the currency of my worth became literal. The more I gave, the less of me they saw, until I was just a ghost haunting their bank statements. By the time the wedding loomed, I wasn't a sister or a daughter. I was the sponsor. The whole affair started with a breathless phone call. "Just the venue," Mom had cooed. "They've found this divine historic estate on the lake, Elara. It's a dream, and honestly, your help would make it a reality." I said yes. Then reality expanded. The photographer's premier package, which included a drone, was apparently non-negotiable. The florist, a local artist who worked with bespoke botanical installations, had a steep minimum. The jazz octet required a 50% deposit. Chloe's gown, well, she had found the one. A cascade of French lace and hand-sewn pearls that was tragically beyond their budget. And Liam's suit, he deserved to look his best, Mom insisted. Each request was delivered with the same soft, weaponized guilt. It wasn't a demand, not quite. It was that expertly timed pause, the unspoken sentiment hanging in the air. You have the means, so you have the responsibility. And I did have the means, so I accepted the responsibility. Within a month, I was so financially entangled that pulling back felt impossible. The wedding planner had my direct line, not theirs. I was negotiating vendor contracts during client calls and approving catering schedules from my office at 10 o'clock at night. I was the maid of honor without the title, the best man without the toast. I kept repeating the mantra to myself, "It's their special day." But even that began to feel like a cruel joke. Whose day was it when I was the one fielding a frantic call about the specific shade of ivory for the napkins while they were at their cake tasting? When the guest list swelled past 250 and they selected a vintage of champagne without even asking my opinion, I found myself doing the grim math over my sad desk salad. $18 per flute, $350 per rental chair. By the time they'd added a custom ice sculpture of their initials, I stopped asking about the cost, because I was the only one who ever did. No one asked if I was okay. The money was infuriating, but it wasn't the deepest wound. It was the total, complete erasure. I wasn't mentioned in a single planning email chain that went out to the family. My name was absent from the wedding website. It was missing from the thank you notes Chloe and Liam sent out for their engagement gifts. They thanked God. They thanked their friends. They thanked all those who have supported our journey. I suppose I was something other than a supporter. By then, I had already paid for the sunset. The ceremony was scheduled for dusk. Guests, draped in silk and linen, mingled under lanterns strung between ancient maple trees. The lakeside estate was breathtaking. It glowed. Each chair along the aisle was adorned with a single, flickering candle in a hurricane glass. A cellist played something heart-wrenchingly beautiful near a stone fountain. I was standing behind the catering tent, deep in a terse conversation with the rental company about a dozen missing tablecloths. When I finally made my way to my seat, I found my place card at table 18, the last table. Next to the kitchen door, the photographer's exhausted assistant, and a second cousin who asked me 3 times what I did for a living, as if the answer weren't funding her entire evening. She was sipping a rosé I had personally selected and paid for. I picked up the program from my plate. On the cover, a stylized drawing of Liam and Chloe with the words, "Our adventure begins." Inside was the order of service, song lyrics, and a passage from a poet I'd never heard of. On the final page, it read, "With deepest gratitude to our village without whom this day would not be possible. Mom and Dad, Chloe's parents, Aunt Carol for the beautiful calligraphy." My name wasn't there. Not once. I have never craved a spotlight. But to be rendered utterly invisible at an event I had single-handedly created, that was a cut of a different kind. I caught Chloe's eye across the manicured lawn. She beamed, a perfect picture of bridal bliss. For her, everything was perfect. The string octet swelled into the opening notes of a classical piece I didn't recognize. Liam stood under a floral archway with our father. They were both in exquisite, custom-tailored tuxedos, the ones I'd paid for. He looked serene, confident, utterly untouched by the logistical nightmare I had wrestled into submission. I took my seat, poured myself a glass of the expensive wine from the bottle on the table, and I waited. I waited for a single word, a nod, a moment of acknowledgement. It never came, but something else did. Dad stepped up to the microphone, already flushed and loose from several glasses of scotch. He held the mic like a prop, grinning at the sea of smiling faces. "We always knew Liam would land someone incredible," he began, his voice booming slightly. "He's got the charm, the heart, and now, finally, he's got a wife who can make him settle down." A wave of warm laughter. Liam grinned. Chloe dipped her head, the picture of a blushing bride. Dad took a long sip of his drink. "And as for my other child, Elara," he paused, a deliberate, theatrical silence that drew every eye in my direction. He turned his head slightly, locking his gaze on me at table 18. "Well, she's not married, no kids, didn't even finish college." He let out a low chuckle, a conspiratorial sound shared with the crowd. "But thank God she knows how to run a business because, hey, someone's got to pay for all this." The laughter that followed was different. It was sharp, immediate, and unrestrained. My brother laughed, throwing his head back. Chloe laughed, a hand covering her perfect mouth. My mother smiled, a tight, pained expression that signaled this was just Dad being Dad. Harmless fun. I didn't smile. I didn't move. I sat there as still as the candle flame on my table, the stem of my wine glass cold in my hand. The first emotion wasn't anger. It was a sharp, familiar coldness. It was the echo of 1,000 smaller slights. The time they forgot my birthday but threw a party for Liam's new car. The times they'd called me too ambitious or too independent as if they were character flaws. The times they'd dismissed any potential problem of mine with a casual, "Oh, Elara's fine. She doesn't need us." I guess they assumed that meant I didn't feel either. Quietly, without a sound, I pushed my chair back. No drama, no theatrics. I walked through the tables toward the front. Dad, still grinning, held the microphone out to me as if inviting me to join the roast. I didn't look at him. I looked past him at the guests, at the fairy lights, at my family. I took the mic. My voice was soft, but it carried in the sudden, curious silence. "He's right." The silence deepened, becoming heavy. "I'm not married. I don't have children. I never got a fancy diploma. But I do have 2 things none of you seem to have noticed tonight: a spine and the receipts." I turned my head slowly, my gaze landing on Liam and Chloe, their smiles now frozen and uncertain. "You know that $150,000 wedding gift? The one that paid for this estate, this dress, this dinner, this entire perfect day?" I let a small, cold smile touch my lips. "Consider it revoked." I didn't wait for the gasps to turn into words. I didn't wait for an objection or for a single person to stand. I simply placed the microphone carefully on the DJ's table, turned, and walked away. Behind me, the music did not resume. Someone gasped loudly. I think it was my mother who called my name, her voice not angry, not pleading, but utterly bewildered, as if she genuinely couldn't comprehend what had just happened. And perhaps that was the most stunning part of all. They didn't think they were wrong. To them, I was just fulfilling my designated role, the successful one, the one who could afford to be generous and silent. But my silence was a finite resource, and I was fresh out. I didn't drive home. That had been part of a plan I hadn't even fully admitted to myself I was making. 3 days earlier, I had booked a corner suite at a quiet boutique hotel downtown. High floors, wide windows, impeccable soundproofing. I dropped my clutch on the marble-top table, kicked off my heels, and poured a tall glass of sparkling water. I expected to feel a surge of power, of righteous fury. Instead, I just felt hollow. Like I'd been leaking for a decade, and tonight was just the first time I'd acknowledged the drought. I opened my laptop. I logged into the master financial account I had set up for the wedding. Yes, an account I had created, because I had been burned before. Because I had learned that unrecorded generosity quickly becomes an entitlement. This time, I had wanted a paper trail. The venue deposit charged to my card. The floral invoice paid from my account. Every linen, every custom cocktail stirrer, every one of those delicate, gold-rimmed plates was mine. But they didn't know the most crucial detail. I didn't just fund the account, I controlled it through a trust. Every final payment, every scheduled transfer, every last outstanding balance required my digital signature for release. And I had not yet cleared the final, largest round of payments. I navigated to the main dashboard. A list of pending transactions glowed on the screen. I moved the cursor over the large, red button that read, "Freeze all outgoing payments." The screen blinked. A confirmation box appeared. "All scheduled and pending transactions will be suspended indefinitely." If I was just a checkbook to them, then this was me, closing it. I clicked confirm. The next morning, my phone vibrated at 6:17 a.m. The screen glowed with a single word, "Mom." I let it ring 3 times before answering, putting it on speaker. Her voice was thin and raspy, the sound of someone who has been up all night rehearsing arguments. "Elara, where are you?" I said nothing, just watched the sun slice between the downtown skyscrapers. Liam said you made a scene." "He said you ruined everything." "No," I replied, my voice calm and even. "Dad made a scene, I just responded to it." A sharp exhale on her end, a calculated shift in strategy. "You know your father, he was just joking, he didn't mean it that way." "Don't call me a liar, Mom." A new silence, longer this time. "Okay," she said, her tone turning cautious, like she was approaching a spooked animal. "Look, tensions were high. Chloe is devastated. Liam is beside himself. You can't just... I'm not your financial solution anymore." Real silence now. I waited for the usual pivot to guilt, the emotional plea about family and obligation. It didn't come. Instead, her voice dropped to a near whisper. "Are you really going to abandon your brother on his honeymoon?" A small, mirthless smile touched my lips. "I already paid for his business class tickets to Tuscany," I said. "Seems like a fitting place for him to reflect." I ended the call. By noon, the digital assault began. A text from Chloe. "Elara, we need to talk. I had no idea he was going to say that. I am so sorry." Then Liam, "We need you." That one almost made me laugh. They didn't need me when they were posing for photos. They didn't need me when they were choosing their honeymoon suite. They didn't need me when they were assigning me to table 18. But now, suddenly, I was essential. Then, at 3:42 p.m., the email arrived. Subject, urgent, outstanding balance for Vance Porter wedding. The estate's event manager. She had tried to process the final payment. The card was declined. She politely inquired if there was a problem with the account and informed me that per our contract, I had 72 hours to remit payment before the matter was escalated to their legal department. That was when the other shoe dropped. The real one. They'd chosen the house before the wedding, not Liam and Chloe, my parents. Over a casual dinner a month before, just the 3 of us eating takeout on their patio, Dad had dropped it into the conversation as if discussing the weather. "We're thinking," he'd said, "of signing the house over to Liam and Chloe, a proper wedding gift, to give them a solid start." I remember placing my fork down very carefully. "Why would you do that?" Mom chimed in, not missing a beat. "Well, honey, Liam is starting a family. He needs a foundation. You've always been so career-focused, you never wanted to settle down here." And in that moment, I saw it with blinding clarity. They truly believed it was theirs to give. "That's not possible," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Because I own this house." They'd both waved it off as if I were quibbling over semantics. "It's all family property, Elara," Dad had muttered. A technicality. I should have drawn the line right then in permanent ink. But some small, stupidly loyal part of me thought it was just talk. It wasn't. While I was coordinating their son's wedding, my parents had been meeting with a lawyer to start the transfer paperwork. They never asked. They never told me. They just assumed I would fall in line, as I always had. But they had forgotten the circumstances of my ownership. 5 years earlier, after Dad's coffee business went under and they were facing foreclosure, I stepped in. I didn't just help with the mortgage. I bought the house outright, paid off their debts, and placed the deed in a revocable living trust. They could live there, rent-free, for the rest of their lives. The one single condition was that no major decisions regarding the property could be made without my explicit, written consent as the sole trustee. I called my lawyer, Genevieve. She is sharp, efficient, and has zero tolerance for familial nonsense. The next morning, a concise 2-page document landed in my inbox. It clearly outlined the legal status of the trust and the fraudulent nature of any attempted transfer. I forwarded the PDF to my parents. No subject line, no message, just the attachment. 41 minutes later, my father called. "You think you're being clever," he snarled. "No," I said calmly. "I think I'm being clear." It was nearly 11 p.m. when the knock came at my hotel room door. Not a frantic banging or a timid tap, just 3 solid, even knocks. I was halfway through a documentary, a cup of chamomile tea in my hand. In this hotel at this hour, no one knocks without a purpose. 3 more knocks. I stood, placed my cup on the table, and walked to the peephole. It was Liam. His tuxedo jacket was rumpled. His tie was gone. His eyes were red-rimmed, not from crying, but from pure, uncut stress. In his hand, he held a thick manila folder. I didn't open the door. He leaned in close, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Elara, 5 minutes, please." I remained silent. "I screwed up," he said, his voice cracking. "I know, I thought if I smoothed things over with Dad, it would all work out." He let out a dry, hollow laugh. "Now everything is on fire. Mom's having panic attacks, Chloe's staying with her parents. I tried to sell that vintage watch you gave me for my 30th to cover the deposit on our new apartment, but it turns out the landlord needs first and last month's rent, not a timepiece." He paused, and his voice dropped to the small, pleading tone he used as a kid after breaking something valuable. "I know I don't deserve a thing from you, but I thought you should have this." He held the folder up to the peephole. "It's everything, a breakdown of all the wedding costs." I highlighted the things you paid for versus the few things her parents covered. There's a note in there, too. I didn't want you to think I didn't see it, that I never cared. Still, I said nothing. He sagged against the door. "I always looked up to you, Elara. I still do. I got lazy. It was easier to let everyone pretend your success was different, that it didn't count as much because it wasn't the kind they understood. But you built something. From nothing." A beat of silence. "Please, just read it." Another moment passed. I finally spoke, my voice flat. "Leave it on the floor." He didn't argue. I heard the soft slide of the folder under the door. When I finally opened it a few minutes later, the hallway was empty. The folder sat on the carpet like a surrendered flag. Inside, he had tried. There were spreadsheets, receipts, highlighted bank statements. There were sticky notes with frantic scribbles. Dad insisted on this upgrade. Chloe thought this was from her parents. "My fault, forgot to thank you for this." And at the very back, a single sheet of notebook paper, a handwritten letter. It was short and it was almost believable. He wrote about his jealousy, his entitlement, his cowardice in playing along because it was easier than confronting them. It felt almost real. Then my laptop pinged. An email from my bank. Subject: Fraud Prevention Alert. "We have detected and blocked a suspicious transaction attempt of $22,500 from the vendor, Lakeside Estate and Gardens, on your authorized user card ending in 4822, issued to Liam Vance." He hadn't come to apologize. He had come to stall, to play for my sympathy while he tried to quietly use my money one last time. I stared at the email. Then I turned back to my laptop and opened the main financial dashboard for my family's life. The web of small, automatic payments I had maintained for years. Mom's monthly subscription boxes, Dad's golf club membership, Liam's car payment, their shared family cell phone plan. I hovered the cursor over each one. Then, with a quiet, deliberate finality, I began to click. Disable, disable, disable. Click, click, click. No anger, no shouting, no warning, just off. I didn't need revenge. I needed peace. For years, my phone had been a constant stream of needs disguised as news. Now it fell silent. They weren't checking if I was okay. They were only ever checking if I was still available. And the answer was no. They were not entitled to a second, kinder version of me just because they had broken the first one. That night, I made another cup of tea and let the silence in the room expand. It wasn't a triumphant silence. It was just quiet, but I knew it was a temporary peace. When the Bank of Elara finally closes, that's when the knocking truly begins. After 3 days of blessed silence, the first voicemail landed. Mom, tearful, rambling, and steeped in accusation. "You're tearing this family apart, Elara," she whispered. "This isn't what a family does. She never said we were wrong. She never said I'm sorry. Only that my reaction was the problem. Dad didn't call. He sent a single text. 'You will regret this.' I printed it out and taped it inside the folder Liam had left, right below a spreadsheet titled Elara's Contributions. A perfect summary. The calls continued from new numbers. Chloe's parents. An unknown lawyer representing the estate. A formal letter arrived at my office. A request to renegotiate repayment terms. Genevieve sent a one-line reply. Settlement is contingent on a full, public admission of financial misrepresentation and a withdrawal of all claims. The response we got was a sputtering, incoherent mess of threats and blame. They weren't sorry they had pushed me over the edge. They were just furious that I hadn't given them a softer landing. When a ship is going down, some people look for a lifeboat. Others just look for someone else to blame for the whole. I wasn't on the ship anymore. I had spent 10 years bailing water with a smile while they threw a party on the deck. The second I put down the bucket, they started screaming that I had let them drown. 6 months have passed. Liam's startup folded for good. He sold his car. Chloe moved back to her home state. My mother took a part-time job at a bookstore. My father has stopped communicating entirely. They still live in the house, but as tenants, not owners. It is no longer theirs to give. And me, I travel for work. I read books on my own quiet patio. I laugh loud and unrestrained at stupid movies. Sometimes I think about that wedding. The lanterns, the string octet, the laughter. The specific sound of that laughter aimed at me. And I remind myself that their joke was real. So this silence, this new, expansive quiet in my life, it gets to be real too. I'm not looking for sympathy or advice. I'm just looking for a sign that I'm not alone in this. A sign that you've been there, in that room, at that table. That moment when choosing yourself felt less like an act of anger and more like an act of survival. If you have ever had to build a fortress of silence because your words were never heard, leave a single period in the comments.